From the moment she was born, Shiloh Newell Jolie Pitt entered a world unlike that of most children. As the first biological child of two of Hollywood's most famous figures, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, her life unfolded under intense public scrutiny. Cameras followed her parents everywhere. Tabloids speculated endlessly about their relationship, and every appearance of their children became instant global news. For Shiloh, fame was not something she chose. It was a circumstance she inherited, shaping her childhood in ways both visible and unseen. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt first captured the public's imagination as a couple in the mid-2000s. Their relationship, which began after they worked together on Mr. and Mrs. Smith, quickly became one of the most talked-about romances in the entertainment industry. Over time, they built what many people viewed as a modern, global family, one defined by adoption across cultures, humanitarian values, and a public commitment to compassion and inclusion. When Shiloh was born in 2006, she became a symbol of that family's next chapter. Unlike many celebrity births, Shiloh's arrival was carefully managed to avoid chaos. She was born in Namibia, a decision her parents made to escape the aggressive paparazzi culture surrounding Hollywood and Europe. At the time, the move was widely praised as a stand against intrusive media practices. Even so, Shiloh's birth made headlines around the world. The public fascination was immediate and intense, reinforcing the reality that privacy would always be difficult for her to maintain. As Shiloh grew older, the Jolie Pitt household continued to expand. Her siblings, Maddox, Zahara, Pax, and later twins Knox and Vivian, formed a family unit that was frequently presented as close-knit and affectionate. Angelina Jolie often spoke in interviews about motherhood being the central purpose of her life, describing her children as grounding forces who shaped her values and decisions. Brad Pitt, too, emphasized the importance of fatherhood, speaking publicly about wanting his children to grow up with freedom, curiosity, and emotional security. Despite these intentions, growing up in such a famous family brought unavoidable pressure. Red carpet appearances, airport photographs, and casual outings were regularly documented and analyzed. For Shiloh, even small details, her clothing choices, hairstyles, and expressions, became topics of public discussion. This level of attention blurred the line between public interest and personal boundaries, creating an environment where her development was constantly observed rather than quietly nurtured. During her early childhood, Shiloh occasionally appeared alongside her parents at film premieres and official events. These moments, while brief, contributed to the public's perception of her as confident and expressive. Yet it was also evident that Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt attempted to shield their children from unnecessary exposure. They limited interviews involving the kids and repeatedly emphasized that their children were not obligated to follow careers in entertainment. Behind the scenes, the Jolie Pitt family also prioritized humanitarian work. Travel to different parts of the world was not only part of Angelina Jolie's work with international organizations, but also a way to educate her children about global realities. Shiloh accompanied her parents on several of these trips, observing refugee camps, meeting displaced families, and witnessing hardship far removed from Hollywood's glamour. These experiences reportedly played a role in shaping her worldview, grounding her in empathy rather than privilege. However, the family's public image began to shift dramatically in the mid-2010s. In 2016, Angelina Jolie filed for divorce from Brad Pitt, marking the end of one of Hollywood's most high-profile marriages. The separation was followed by years of legal proceedings, custody discussions, and media speculation. For the children, including Shiloh, this period introduced a new kind of visibility, one tied not to admiration, but to conflict. Court filings, anonymous sources, and tabloid reports often blurred together, making it difficult for the public to distinguish confirmed facts from rumor. What remained clear, however, was that the divorce placed enormous emotional strain on the family. Angelina Jolie consistently stated that her primary concern was the well-being of her children, while Brad Pitt expressed a desire to remain actively involved in their lives. The legal process unfolded slowly, keeping the family's private struggles in the public eye for years as Shiloh entered her teenage years. Public attention shifted from her parents' relationship to her own identity and personal choices. Observers noted that she appeared increasingly independent, less defined by the expectations traditionally placed on celebrity children. Rather than pursuing acting roles or modeling opportunities, she seemed to gravitate toward more personal forms of expression. This quiet resistance to the spotlight stood in contrast to the intense curiosity surrounding her. Throughout this time, Angelina Jolie maintained that her children were encouraged to discover who they were without pressure. In interviews, she emphasized honesty over perfection, acknowledging that parenting was not about control, but about creating a safe space for growth. Shiloh's upbringing, shaped by both privilege and turmoil, reflected this philosophy, one that valued individuality even amid extraordinary circumstances. By the time Shiloh reached her late teens, she had already lived through experiences that many people never encounter. Global fame from birth, international travel, public family conflict, and constant speculation about her future. Yet despite these challenges, she continued to present herself with a quiet confidence that suggested resilience rather than rebellion. This balance between fame and privacy, expectation and independence, defines Shiloh Jolie Pitt's story. Her early life was not simply a tale of celebrity excess or advantage, but one marked by complexity, adaptation, and growth. Understanding this foundation is essential to understanding the choices she would later make as she moved closer to adulthood. The separation of Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt in 2016 marked a decisive turning point in the lives of their children. What had once been presented as a united, globally minded family suddenly became the focus of prolonged legal disputes and intense media attention. For Shiloh Jolie Pitt, who was only 10 years old at the time, the divorce represented more than the end of her parents' marriage. It signaled a shift in stability, routine, and the sense of security that had defined much of her early childhood. When Angelina Jolie filed for divorce, she cited irreconcilable differences and requested primary physical custody of the children. Brad Pitt sought joint custody, expressing his desire to remain deeply involved in their lives. What followed was a complex and emotionally charged legal process that extended over several years. While many details remained sealed, enough information entered the public domain to fuel widespread speculation and debate. The constant media coverage meant that even the most private aspects of family life were subject to public interpretation. For the children, this period was characterized by uncertainty. Custody arrangements evolved over time, and visits with each parent became structured through legal frameworks rather than organic family routines. Shiloh, once accustomed to traveling freely with both parents, now had to navigate a new reality shaped by court decisions and supervised agreements. Psychologists often note that such transitions can be especially challenging for children approaching adolescence, a stage already defined by emotional and identity development. Angelina Jolie repeatedly emphasized that her decisions were guided by what she believed was best for her children. In court filings and public statements, she described herself as a protective mother prioritizing safety and emotional well-being. Brad Pitt, on the other hand, acknowledged personal struggles during that period, including his own efforts towards self-reflection and growth. He later spoke openly about the importance of accountability and personal change, framing the divorce as a painful but transformative experience. The public, however, was often left to piece together an incomplete picture. Allegations, counterclaims, and anonymous sources created a narrative environment where facts and interpretations coexisted uneasily. For Shiloh and her siblings, this meant growing up amid conversations they did not control. Conversations about their family that unfolded on television screens, news websites, and social media platforms worldwide. As time passed, the children began to grow older and more aware of their surroundings. Some of them reached an age where their preferences could be considered in custody discussions, adding another layer of complexity to the legal process. While courts aim to protect children from undue influence, the reality is that older children often develop their own perspectives based on lived experience. Shiloh, in particular, entered a stage of life where independence and personal agency became increasingly important. Observers noted that Shiloh appeared to spend more time with her mother during certain periods, often accompanying Angelina Jolie to humanitarian events, film premieres, and international trips. These shared experiences seemed to strengthen their bond, reinforcing a sense of partnership rather than hierarchy. At the same time, Brad Pitt continued to express his commitment to fatherhood, emphasizing his hope that time and healing would allow for stronger relationships with his children. The emotional toll of prolonged legal conflict is difficult to measure, but its impact is widely acknowledged. Family law experts often warn that extended custody disputes can leave lasting impressions on children, particularly when media coverage amplifies every development. For Shiloh, whose life had already been shaped by fame, this added exposure further complicated her path toward normalcy. Financial considerations also played a role in shaping the narrative around the divorce. Reports of substantial legal fees and disputes over shared assets highlighted the high stakes involved. While the figures themselves were often speculative, they underscore the reality that even immense wealth does not shield families from emotional strain. For the children, the focus was less on financial outcomes and more on stability, routine, and emotional reassurance. Despite the challenges, both Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt publicly reiterated their commitment to co-parenting. They spoke of wanting their children to feel loved, supported, and free to pursue their own paths. Whether this goal was consistently realized behind closed doors remains known only to those directly involved. What is clear is that the divorce reshaped the Jolie Pitt household in lasting ways. As Shiloh continued to grow, the shifting family dynamics became a backdrop against which she began to define herself more clearly. The experience of witnessing conflict, change, and adaptation may have accelerated her maturity, prompting a deeper awareness of personal boundaries and values. Rather than withdrawing completely, she seemed to channel her experiences into quiet self-expression, choosing actions over statements. The story of the Jolie Pitt divorce is not merely a tale of celebrity separation. It is also a case study in how public lives intersect with private pain. For Shiloh, this chapter laid the groundwork for the decisions she would later make. Decisions shaped by a desire for autonomy, balance, and authenticity. As Shiloh Jolie Pitt moved from childhood into adolescence, public attention gradually shifted from her parents' relationship to her own personal journey. Unlike many children of celebrities who are guided toward acting, modeling, or carefully curated public personas, Shiloh appeared to take a different path, one marked by restraint, introspection, and a quiet determination to define herself on her own terms. This period of her life became less about public appearances and more about internal exploration, even as the world continued to watch. From an early age, Shiloh demonstrated a strong sense of individuality. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt both spoke openly in past interviews about allowing their children the freedom to explore who they were without rigid expectations. In Shiloh's case, this approach became especially visible. Her clothing choices, hairstyles, and mannerisms often challenged traditional norms, drawing attention not because they were provocative, but because they were authentic. Rather than conforming to what the public expected of a celebrity daughter, Shiloh appeared focused on comfort and self-expression. Angelina Jolie addressed this openly in several interviews, emphasizing that parenting, in her view, was about listening rather than directing. She explained that children often reveal who they are if given the space to do so, and that her role was to support rather than define them. This philosophy shaped how Shiloh was allowed to present herself to the world, even when public reaction was intense. While some media outlets speculated endlessly about what her choices meant, her parents largely refrained from labeling or explaining, choosing instead to protect her autonomy. For Shiloh, adolescence unfolded in a way that blended universal challenges with uniquely public pressures. Like many teenagers, she navigated questions of identity, belonging, and self-confidence. Unlike most, however, her journey was analyzed in headlines and online forums. Each public sighting became a source of commentary, often reducing complex personal growth into simplified narratives. Despite this, Shiloh rarely appeared reactive to public opinion, maintaining a composed and grounded presence. Education and privacy were central to this phase of her life. Unlike many celebrity children who attend elite performing arts schools, Shiloh's upbringing emphasized balance. Her parents made efforts to ensure that learning extended beyond academics, incorporating travel, humanitarian exposure, and cultural awareness. These experiences offered her perspectives far removed from Hollywood's insular environment, helping her understand the world beyond fame and privilege. During this time, Shiloh also began to distance herself from traditional celebrity pathways. Although she had appeared briefly in films as a child, she showed little interest in pursuing acting as a career. Angelina Jolie later acknowledged that not all of her children wanted to be in front of the camera, and that this was something she fully supported. For Shiloh, creativity seemed to take more personal forms rather than professional ones. One of the most notable aspects of Shiloh's development was her increasing focus on physical movement and expression. Dance, in particular, emerged as a meaningful outlet. While she never publicly announced an ambition to become a professional dancer, her dedication suggested more than casual interest. Videos shared online, often by third parties rather than official accounts, showed her practicing complex routines with confidence and discipline. These moments offered rare glimpses into an activity that appeared to bring her genuine joy. Dance provided Shiloh with something that acting and red carpets did not: anonymity within effort. In a studio, skill matters more than lineage. Technique, rhythm, and expression become the focus rather than last names. For someone raised under constant observation, this environment may have offered a sense of normalcy and control. Movement became a language through which she could communicate without explanation or justification. At the same time, Shiloh's relationship with public attention continued to evolve. She appeared increasingly selective about when and how she was seen, often accompanying her mother to events without engaging in the spectacle that typically surrounds celebrity appearances. This restraint suggests a deliberate approach to visibility, one that balanced presence with distance. Psychologists often note that children of high-profile parents face unique challenges in establishing personal identity. Expectations, comparisons, and inherited narratives can complicate the process of self-definition. Shiloh's journey, however, appeared to reflect a thoughtful navigation of these challenges. Rather than rejecting her background outright, she seemed to acknowledge it while refusing to be confined by it. This phase of her life also coincided with ongoing family tensions, which likely influenced her desire for independence. Witnessing prolonged conflict can accelerate emotional maturity, prompting young people to seek stability within themselves rather than external structures. For Shiloh, this may have reinforced her inclination towards self-reliance and quiet resilience to be why her mid-teens. Shiloh Jolie Pitt had already demonstrated a remarkable ability to remain grounded amid extraordinary circumstances. Her approach to identity was not loud or declarative, but steady and self-assured. She did not seek validation through public statements or dramatic gestures. Instead, she allowed her choices, how she dressed, where she focused her energy, and what she avoided, to speak for her. Understanding this chapter of Shiloh's life is essential to understanding what followed. Her evolving sense of self, shaped by freedom, observation, and lived experience, laid the foundation for decisions that would later draw renewed attention. These decisions were not sudden or impulsive, but the natural result of years spent quietly learning who she was as Shiloh Jolie Pitt entered the later stages of adolescence. Public interest in her life intensified once again. This renewed attention did not stem from a single public statement or official announcement, but rather from a series of subtle, personal choices that observers interpreted as signs of growing independence. In a culture accustomed to dramatic reveals, Shiloh's quiet evolution stood out precisely because it resisted spectacle. Her actions invited interpretation without offering explanation, allowing media narratives to form in the absence of direct confirmation. One of the most discussed aspects of this period was Shiloh's increasingly limited public presence. While she continued to appear occasionally alongside her mother at events or during travel, she largely avoided individual interviews or personal commentary. In an era where social media often serves as a primary outlet for self-expression, Shiloh's absence from official platforms was notable. Rather than cultivating an online identity, she appeared to prioritize privacy, letting secondhand accounts and fan-shared content shape the public's perception. This restraint stood in contrast to the constant digital visibility expected of young public figures. For many observers, it suggested a conscious decision to maintain boundaries in a world that often disregards them. By choosing not to engage directly with public discourse, Shiloh limited the extent to which her personal growth could be commodified or misinterpreted. This approach, while effective in preserving privacy, also left space for speculation, a trade-off common to those who live public lives but seek private agency. Media outlets, eager to fill that space, often framed Shiloh's choices through broader cultural lenses. Discussions about identity, independence, and generational change became intertwined with her image. While some commentary was supportive, emphasizing self-acceptance and autonomy, other narratives leaned toward sensationalism. These interpretations frequently reflected societal expectations rather than Shiloh's own words, highlighting the disconnect between lived experience and public projection. Throughout this period, Angelina Jolie remained a visible presence in Shiloh's life. Their close relationship was evident in shared appearances and collaborative humanitarian travel. Jolie spoke openly about respecting her children's individuality, reinforcing the idea that growth often requires freedom from rigid definitions. This parental support appeared to provide Shiloh with a stable foundation from which to explore her identity without fear of judgment from within her own family. Brad Pitt's role, while less publicly visible, continued to be a subject of discussion. Reports and sources offered varying perspectives on his relationship with his children, contributing to a complex and often contradictory public narrative. What remained consistent, however, was the acknowledgement that Shiloh was navigating these dynamics during a formative period of her life. Balancing personal development with family relationships is challenging for any teenager. Doing so under constant observation adds an additional layer of complexity as Shiloh approached adulthood. The idea of independence took on new significance. Legal adulthood represents not only a change in rights and responsibilities, but also a symbolic transition, one that can redefine family relationships and personal agency. For Shiloh, this transition was closely watched, with commentators speculating about what it might mean for her future living arrangements, education, and personal pursuits. Despite the noise surrounding her, Shiloh's behavior remained measured. She did not publicly confirm or deny rumors, nor did she attempt to control the narrative through statements or interviews. This silence was not emptiness, but rather a form of self-protection. In choosing when not to speak, she asserted control over a narrative that others were eager to claim. Cultural analysts often note that silence can be a powerful response in a media environment driven by immediacy and reaction. Shiloh's approach exemplified this principle. By refraining from public declarations, she allowed her identity to remain fluid rather than fixed by headlines. This fluidity is particularly important during adolescence, when self-understanding is still evolving. At the same time, public fascination persisted. Every photograph, every reported decision, became a point of analysis. This constant attention underscores a broader issue: society's tendency to project meaning onto the lives of those connected to fame, even when those individuals have not sought recognition themselves. Shiloh's experience reflects this dynamic, illustrating how personal choices can be transformed into public symbols. Yet beneath these narratives lies a more grounded reality. Shiloh Jolie Pitt is, at her core, a young person navigating growth, change, and self-discovery. Her choices, while observed by millions, are shaped by the same desires that guide many adolescents: the desire for authenticity, stability, and self-understanding. The difference lies not in the nature of these desires, but in the scale of attention they attract. As this chapter draws to a close, it becomes clear that Shiloh's journey is defined less by what she has said and more by how she has lived. Her independence is expressed not through dramatic gestures, but through consistency and restraint. This approach challenges traditional celebrity narratives, offering an alternative model of growing up in the public eye, one that values quiet agency over performative visibility. As Shiloh Jolie Pitt continued to grow into her late teenage years, a new dimension of her personality began to attract public attention, not through interviews or official appearances, but through movement. Dance emerged as a significant and consistent form of self-expression, offering insight into how she navigates creativity, discipline, and personal freedom. In a world where her last name often precedes her, dance provided a space where effort and authenticity mattered more than identity. Unlike acting, which is deeply intertwined with Jolie Pitt's legacy, dance exists largely outside the expectations placed on her by Hollywood. It is a physically demanding art form that values repetition, control, and emotional connection. For Shiloh, it appeared to function not as a performance for public consumption, but as a personal pursuit. The fact that most dance-related content surfaced through unofficial channels reinforced the impression that this was something she did for herself rather than for recognition. Observers who watched videos of Shiloh practicing noted her focus and intensity. She approached routines with seriousness, demonstrating not only natural ability, but also dedication to improvement. Dance studios are environments built on structure, counting beats, refining technique, and receiving feedback. For someone raised amid unpredictable public attention and family upheaval, this structure may have offered a sense of stability and control. Dance also allowed Shiloh to communicate without explanation. Where words invite interpretation and debate, movement speaks directly to emotion. Through choreography, she could explore confidence, vulnerability, and strength without attaching those expressions to public labels. This nonverbal form of storytelling aligned with her broader tendency toward privacy and restraint, reinforcing the idea that she prefers action over commentary. The public response to these glimpses of Shiloh's dancing was largely positive. Many viewers expressed admiration for her skill and commitment, noting that she did not rely on her family name to generate interest. Instead, her progress appeared earned through practice rather than privilege. This distinction mattered in a cultural landscape often skeptical of celebrity children pursuing creative fields. Dance, by its nature, demands effort that cannot be manufactured through reputation alone. Importantly, Shiloh's engagement with dance did not suggest an attempt to build a public career. There were no official announcements, branded partnerships, or curated content releases. This absence reinforced the sense that her relationship with dance was grounded in personal fulfillment rather than ambition. While some speculated about future professional possibilities, there was no indication that she felt pressure to turn passion into profession. Angelina Jolie's approach to parenting again played a role in shaping this environment. She has consistently emphasized the importance of allowing her children to explore interests organically. In interviews, she spoke about encouraging experimentation rather than specialization, especially during adolescence. Dance, in this context, represented exploration rather than expectation, a way for Shiloh to test her limits and discover what resonated with her. Dance also intersected with broader themes of discipline and resilience. Learning complex choreography requires patience, perseverance, and the ability to accept correction. These qualities mirror the emotional skills often developed through challenging life experiences. For Shiloh, whose adolescence unfolded amid public family conflict, dance may have served as both an outlet and a grounding practice, one that reinforced self-trust through physical mastery. The environment of a dance studio further contrasted with the red carpet world she had known since childhood. In studios, dancers are evaluated on technique, timing, and expression rather than appearance or lineage. This merit-based structure can be particularly empowering for someone seeking identity beyond family legacy. Within this space, Shiloh could exist simply as a student, focus on growth rather than perception. Public fascination with Shiloh's dancing also highlighted a shift in how audiences engage with celebrity children. Rather than demanding polished performances or immediate stardom, many viewers appreciated the authenticity of seeing someone learn and improve. This response suggested a broader cultural appreciation for process over perfection, a value that aligned with Shiloh's understated approach to visibility. At the same time, it is important to acknowledge the limits of public understanding. While dance provided visible insight into one aspect of Shiloh's life, it did not define her entirely. Like most teenagers, she likely balanced multiple interests, relationships, and responsibilities beyond what was visible online. Dance was a window, not a full portrait as she approached adulthood. The role of creative expression in Shiloh's life appeared less about escape and more about integration. It became part of how she navigated change, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. Rather than distancing herself from her background, she seemed to be building a sense of self that could coexist with it. As Shiloh Jolie Pitt moves closer to adulthood, the conversation surrounding her life has shifted once again. No longer viewed simply as a child growing up in extraordinary circumstances, she is increasingly seen as a young adult preparing to make independent choices. This transition carries particular significance given her family's history, the public nature of her upbringing, and the ongoing evolution of her relationships with both of her parents. Adulthood represents a legal milestone, but it is also a psychological and emotional turning point. For Shiloh, reaching this stage means gaining greater control over decisions related to education, residence, and personal direction. In families shaped by divorce and custody arrangements, this shift often alters dynamics, reducing the influence of legal structures and increasing the importance of personal relationships. Observers have naturally speculated about how this change might affect her connections with Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. Angelina Jolie has remained a consistent presence throughout Shiloh's formative years. Her parenting style, often described as protective yet permissive, emphasized listening and adaptability. Jolie has spoken about allowing her children to lead conversations about their own lives rather than imposing narratives upon them. As Shiloh approaches adulthood, this approach may ease the transition, having already fostered independence and self-trust. rather than a sudden break from parental guidance. Adulthood appears as a continuation of values already established. Brad Pitt's relationship with his children has been less visible, but no less significant. In interviews over the years, Pitt has acknowledged personal challenges and spoken candidly about the process of growth and accountability. He emphasized learning from mistakes and striving to be present as a father. While public narratives have often framed his relationship with his children through the lens of legal disputes, those close to the situation have suggested that the emotional reality is more nuanced, shaped by time, effort, and mutual willingness to heal. For Shiloh, navigating these relationships likely involves balancing empathy with self-preservation. Young adults from separated families often find themselves redefining connections, moving beyond childhood roles and expectations. This process can include reassessing boundaries, clarifying needs, and deciding how much involvement feels healthy. In Shiloh's case, these decisions are further complicated by public interests, which tend to amplify every perceived shift. Despite speculation, Shiloh has continued to avoid public statements about her family. This silence reflects consistency rather than avoidance. Throughout her life, she has demonstrated a preference for private processing over public declaration. As she steps into adulthood, this approach may serve her well, allowing her to make choices without external pressure or performative expectation. Education and future plans remain largely undisclosed, reinforcing the sense that Shiloh values discretion. Whether she chooses to pursue higher education, creative training, humanitarian work, or an entirely different path, the absence of public confirmation suggests a deliberate effort to keep options open. This openness is itself a form of agency, resisting the tendency to define success too narrowly or too early. The broader cultural context also matters. Shiloh belongs to a generation increasingly skeptical of traditional celebrity trajectories. Many young people prioritize mental health, authenticity, and flexibility